Добрий день.
Good afternoon, my name is Olga Tomanova and I want to thank everybody who joins Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. It's day 420 of the full-scale invasion of Russian occupiers of our homeland, and now we will be talking about the situation in Kherson region. Joining us online is the first deputy head of Kherson Regional Council, Yuriy Sobolevskyi. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Yuriy. We know that shellings of Kherson and Kherson region are unfortunately going on. So what's the situation for the time being? What are the consequences of the shellings? Unfortunately, the security situation is still very complicated. We see that lately the intensity of shellings increased substantially. There were 79 documented shellings of our territory within the last day. The enemy used more than 300 projectiles. They systemically use powerful aviation bombs, which adds the insecurity, because if there will be incoming to the places of concentration of people, it will result in very negative consequences. For the time being, the shellings are still going on, including targeting Kherson. The last one just ended 15 minutes ago. Currently, there are people injured and another one addressed for medical help. They got minor injury yesterday, but they still need medical attention. Mr. Yuriy, talking about the situation with the critical infrastructure, what is it currently? We may say that it's satisfactory, well, relatively satisfactory, because we managed to maintain its operation. The regional capital has water, power and heat supply, but sometimes after the shellings they result in damage of critical infrastructure, and for some periods the supply is suspended because the repair works are going on. Our communities are being reconnected to the infrastructural services. The work is underway and everything will be reestablished in all of the communities. There are plans for operation of every company which are involved in this work, and regional military administration keeps track of all those processes. We provide all the necessary assistance and support to those companies. There is maximum assistance on part of the government, and we're seeing it. Mr. Yuriy, talking about the casualties among the civil population, we're seeing that every day someone gets injured, someone unfortunately dies as a result of the bombardments. So starting from the moment of the occupation, do we have understanding of the number of people who died or were injured due to such shellings? We have such statistics, but unfortunately I don't have these figures at hand. For the time being, we maintain the statistics of the people both injured and those who perished, but I would like to focus your attention on the fact that we keep losing people, unfortunately, in those cases when it shouldn't have happened. I'm talking about the mine threat, when people consciously commit some actions with an explosive devices and which result in death or injury. Such things should not be happening. I think that everybody should know how to handle those explosive devices in Kherson region. When people pick them up, it's really horrible. We try to continue this information campaign. We try to inform the population to the maximum extent possible how to act in those situations, but from time to time, every once in a while those situations are still happening. There are no more injured for the time being, but in the same way, during the bombardment, people just come up to their windows to check out where the incoming was, and they get injured and that there are no such cases within the last week, no people injured in that way, but those are the situations that used to happen, and we could avoid those injuries if people comply with the elementary safety measures. Mr. Yuriy, yesterday all the propaganda media were telling about the visit of Putin to Kherson region. I'm sure you have people who are currently, unfortunately, in the temporarily occupied territory of Kherson region. What do they tell about that visit, and do we understand the consequences of this demonstrative trip by the Russian dictator? Well, we were communicating with those people, and they only had pejorative terms with regard to this so-called visit. There are still certain doubts about the reality of this visit. We know what are the measures that are being taken by the occupational authorities before the visits of such top government officials, and there were no such security measures taken over there back then. So we have significant doubts that it was specifically Putin and he was visiting the temporarily occupied territories. Why was it necessary for them to do this? They only do make the picture for their own audience. They want to show that they have a brave leader who visits the new Russian, in parentheses, obviously the new Russian territory, that he surveys it and he knows what's going on in all the fronts, but everybody understands that it's the purely propaganda picture, just like always, and there are no legal consequences which this visit would entail, and it does not entail any. The morale of the military, well, I have doubts that it would influence their morale. We see what's their sentiment for the time being. Their battle capacities are not quite high in the majority of their units. Their commanders try to get them busy with something, dig the trenches from the morning until dark. So, but there is really no need in creating this additional defense line when they stop exercising that maximum control over their subordinates. What's going on is alcoholism and maraudery. This is what's going on in Russian armed forces in the temporarily occupied territory of Ukraine. Mr. Yuriy, but talking about the overall situation in temporarily occupied territory, what do the people say? What's the situation in Kakhovka, Oleshka and other places? Look, the situation over there is very difficult for our people because the Russians intensify pressure on them, and this forced passportization that they impose, they continue pressing on the people to receive the Russian passports, and they restrict the access to the medical services without Russian passports. And they say if they don't have Russian passports, they would not get the insurance policy, the health insurance policy, and that there is deterioration of the situation with the provision of people with the basic necessity products, with the humanitarian aids. There are very substantial problems in this regard in certain communities. They continue pressing on children. This youth army that they're trying to create, dressing the children in uniforms and brainwashing them. In this regard, they work very intensively. In certain communities, in certain places, there is pressure on people, so they agree to so-called evacuation, but in fact a deportation to Ufa or other remote places in Russian Federation. They promise support and they promise some dwelling certificate and financial aid, but we see that there are no people who agree to that because everybody understands what's really going on. Unfortunately, the exit from the temporarily occupied territories is currently complicated. People can only go through Crimea to the third countries, and the screening measures are very intense for the time being. People have to be prepared. If a family took the decision to leave, they should make sure that everything is clear with their computers and cell phones, and they should talk to their children. What should they answer to the questions of the FSB as to their attitude to Russian army, to Russian government, their attitude to the Ukrainian armed forces? They ask those questions even from the children. Mr. Yuriy, recently there was an investigation by us, Ukrinform, about the children who were deported from Kherson previously and who were further on returned with difficulties, but we managed to. Are there any cases, any such cases identified in Kherson? Do the parents still address the law enforcement agencies about cases like this? Do you know anything about such cases? I can comment the following. We are obliged to return all of our children. We have to do everything we can to get them back to Ukraine as soon as possible. It's no doubt about this. There's nothing to it goes without saying. I would like to keep silent about this matter because the work is underway, and any promulgation of information may harm this work. There is nothing sacred for the Russians, and it's very difficult for those people who are involved in those processes to return our children to Ukraine, and some additional publicity may only do harm. This is the situation. This is the same situation as with the return of our prisoners of war, when some additional publicity about some persons could harm the situation, because Russians think that it may create additional value for those persons, and they start bargaining, let's exchange 1 for 3 and stuff like that. So if you allow me, I would rather not comment about this situation. Well, so the last question about our agrarians. The sowing campaign has started. So what's the situation in Kherson region with the sowing campaign? Once again, it will be a very complicated season for our agrarians, but what's good is that the majority of them want to come back and resume their operations, but the main problem is the mining for the time being. It's not the problem with the grain, with the machinery. There are programs for the support that were introduced by the Agrarian Ministry and Ministry of Economy. There is a number of programs aimed at the support of the agrarians, but the main problem is the dense mining of the territories. Unfortunately, there is still a very large area that is hazardous, and there was recently a case when a person was injured while running over a mine driving a tractor during their works. All the efforts are currently aimed at expediting the pace of demining, and the results are good. Kherson received additional special material that is capable of inspecting a vast area during a day, well, with certain restrictions, but it still is of very good help to us. The teams of National Police and State Emergency Service of Ukraine, they keep working on this, and our military too. Thank you very much for this broadcast. Thank you for joining us. I'm reminding you, joining us was Yuriy Sobolevskyi, the first deputy head of Kherson Regional Council, and currently our team is working on the schedule of events for tomorrow, so please follow our announcements, and we trust in our armed forces, work together for our victory, and glory to Ukraine.